Hi, it's Dan. I have been getting a lot of requests from people to do a video on how to give a shot of testosterone, and thought about it for a little bit, and I figured it would be a good video to do, simply because it's another perspective of how someone else does a shot. And also, if you watched any of my previous videos, I'm a nursing student. I'm almost done with my nursing degree, and I'd probably give about 2 to 10 shots a week, depending on what's going on in my clinical setting and what's going on with myself. So I tend to do this a lot more than some guys out there because it's part of what my profession is, and I feel like I'm pretty good at it. So that's a different perspective from the nursing standpoint. So I'm just going to go through what you would need, just as if I was teaching somebody, this hasn't been familiar. So you need your sharps container. Obviously, you don't want needles everywhere. And then you need needles, of course. I draw up with an 18 gauge just because it's easier and you don't get as many bubbles and stuff. Then you need a syringe for injecting. Now, I find that the least painful syringes to use would be the 23 gauge, or where are they? 25 gauge. But see, the higher the number goes, the smaller the needle is. And the smaller the needle is, the harder you're going to have to push on the plunger to get the testosterone through because it's an oily, thick substance. And so the thinner you go, the more it's potentially going to sting, and the harder it is going to be to push through. But the thicker you go, the bigger of a wound you're going to make on yourself, and it's going to hurt physically more. So I found that 23 gauge is the best to go. These ones are 1.5 inches, which is a bit long. You only really need 1 inch long needle for this kind of thing. You need alcohol prep pads. You can use the same alcohol pad to wipe off the top of the testosterone vial as prepping your site. That's allowed as long as it's not dry, then you're fine. And then a Band-Aid, of course. I've gotten, I think these are Looney Tunes or something Band-Aids. And then, of course, you need your testosterone. This is my dose. My prescription right now is 50 milligrams a week. And so since there's 1,000 milligrams and 10 milliliters, I'm going to do half a milliliter. Okay? I'm going to put this back over here so you can see what I'm doing. Hopefully. Okay. Alright. So what I do is I get my testosterone out. Since I'm using an 18 gauge needle to draw up, it kind of makes the little rubber stopper that keeps all the testosterone in loose. So you don't really want to play around with it. What I like to do is I like to just hold it in my hands or agitate it or swirl it around a little bit to make sure that's well mixed and that there's no particles. You want to look and make sure you don't see any particles floating around or anything. That could mean, that it's separated or that it's no good anymore. Hopefully, if you're just getting it and following your dose, it won't go bad. There's information about that in the package that it comes in, on that little paper that it comes with. But I like to agitate it a little bit, hold it in my hand while I'm getting ready. If you agitate it too much, there'll be some bubbles and stuff in there, and that makes it a little bit harder to see what you're doing when you draw it up and all that. So, okay. So I prepare my supplies first. Open up the needle. When anything comes in the wrapper, it's kind of good to keep it in there until you absolutely need it. Get out my 18 gauge needle. And of course, before I do this, I'm washing my hands really well. You don't need to wear gloves to draw it up. If you were doing this on somebody else to help out, I would put gloves on prior to giving them their injection, just for, standard precautions, keeping everything clean. So now I'm scrubbing the top of the vial. Generally, you want to go with friction from the inside out And then I can just keep this alcohol pad there to use for later. Now the syringes I have a lure lock, which means if you twist it, it locks into place. So lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. I'm going to twist the needle that comes on the 23 gauge off, and I'm going to leave it in the wrapper. And then I'm going to twist and put on the 18 gauge needle to draw up. Okay? My prescription is half a milliliter. So I'm going to take the lid off. I'm going to draw back to half on my syringe because the testosterone is pressurized. You want to keep the pressure the same. If not, and you just draw out, you're going to put the needle in and then you're not going to be able to pull back, but reverse. If you put in too much air, you're going to put in your syringe and the top will just shoot off, so you got to be careful. So right there I got half a milliliter of air. Go straight down into it, inject the air, then you want to flip it over, make sure your needle is in the testosterone, and draw back more than what you need. You only really have to go to the halfway part, but I like to make sure there's no bubbles in there. If you see bubbles, you want to hold it like that and flick it to get the bubbles out. It'll just move it to the top. And since you drew up more, I drew up 1 cc, than you need, if you flick it and the bubbles go to the top, when you move the plunger up to where you're supposed to be, all the air goes up. I don't know if you can see that. I can see it. So after you've done that, flip it over, and then I draw back to make sure that I've got all the testosterone in there. Okay? Let's see here. When you're recapping something, you always leave the cap on the ground and scoop it up with the needle so that you don't stick yourself. You never want to take a cap and try and do that. And so you twist it, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. That goes into the sharps container. Now, you can pick up the needle you started with or the needle you're going to inject with, 25 gauge, 23 gauge, whatever. Same way as we put on the 18 gauge. Twist it on, and then I would push it all the way up, and then you've got your dose right there. Okay. I pushed it until I could see some of the liquid come through in the cap. Just a little bit to make sure you've got it all the way through the needle and there's no air bubbles at all. So now this is ready. Put that down. Now you've got a couple sites where you can put in testosterone. On both of your thighs, you've got a big muscle called the vastus lateralis. That's the easiest to do when you're doing it yourself. You can go pretty much from away from your bony areas, above your knee, to about right here, and you can go all the way up that. It's a big muscle. It's good. The other places to do is the dorsogluteal, which is your butt, and that's kind of hard to do. I'm not going to go into how to do that right now because it's very easy to mess it up. So I wouldn't recommend trying to do that yourself, or if someone isn't specially trained to do that there, because you can really mess up. Your sciatic nerve runs up through there. There's a lot of nerves and stuff if you go too far over, and it's bad. So only do that with a trained professional. Okay. So I should be wearing gloves right now. I'm doing it on myself. I don't want to. All right. So you got your leg. What you do is you pick where you want to go. You start from the middle. I don't know if you can see this. Start from the middle. Use a lot of friction. And go to the outside. And then you let the alcohol dry. A lot of people could take gauze, and they like to dry over it. I just let it dry because it's better practice and I'm not recontaminating it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the lid of the needle. You always take it off like that so you don't have a chance of stabbing yourself. I'm going to pinch the skin around where I went, dart the medicine in. I'm going to do something called aspirate, which is you pull back on the plunger to see if you're in a blood vessel. That affects the rate of absorption and the quality of your shot. So I would do it even though you don't technically have to. And then I would go down slow and steady. You don't want to punch it in because you want to make sure that you're not causing too much trauma to your tissue, and you want to push anything that you're pushing into the body nice and slow and steady. Okay, so that seems pretty dry. You want to have your gauze ready and a Band-Aid ready, because when you get it in and you take out the testosterone, you want to agitate it, which I'll show you, to make sure that the fluid disperses through the muscle, or at least starts. So if you don't do that well, you can get little calcifications in your leg, and that's not fun. Okay, so it's dry. I'm taking this off. I'm going to pinch the skin. Okay, I'm going to dart it in. You let go. Hold on with your non-dominant hand. Pull back a little. I don't see any blood. So I'm going to push it in. Slow and steady. It's in. Gauze. And I'm going to rub it like I said. It's not going to look pretty. Plus the pressure from the gauze helps the bleeding stop. And this one's bleeding quite a bit. That's why you should use gloves. But this is myself, so I'm not really worried. And you just kind of shake it, put some pressure on it. I'm getting the Band-Aid out. These are interesting Band-Aids where you just pull the edges and they come off. Okay. Clean up the blood. Put on the Band-Aid. And when you put on a Band-Aid for this kind of shot or any other kind, you want to put it on with some tension, because that'll help stop the bleeding if it continued. Your needle, same as always. You want to recap it by sliding the top into it. It's a Lear lock, so twist it. Now the whole thing can go into the sharps container. And that's how you give a shot. Uh-oh. That's no good. Well, anyway, that's how you give a shot. So once again, you put the air in, you inject it into the bottle, you take out the fluid, make sure there's no air bubbles, change the tip. Before you change it, draw it back so that you don't lose any medicine. Change the tip to whatever needle you're going to use. Make sure that there's no bubbles, and you inject it all the way up to where your line's supposed to be. Set that aside. Take your alcohol, clean circular from the right where you're going to inject out with friction. Let that dry. Take the top off the needle that way. Pinch. I didn't talk about that. Pinching is very important. If you pinch hard enough around the muscle where you go, for one, you're stabilizing that muscle, so it's not going to move around and it shouldn't hurt as bad. And just the process of you pinching distracts you from the actual needle prick. When you go in with the needle, always dart it. If you put it on the surface and go slowly, you're going to have the potential for more damage to your muscle, and it's not good technique. If you dart it in, it shouldn't hurt as much. You're making sure you're getting all the way down where you need to. It's nice, smooth, one clean motion. Once the needle's in, you let go where you're pinching. And with that hand, you hold onto the needle. Just draw back on the plunger a little bit to see if there's any blood. It doesn't have to be much at all. Then slow and steady in. When you get to the bottom, take it out, gauze on it, rub it in a little bit, and keep pressure on it to make sure that the bleeding stops. Change to a Band-Aid and you're done. So gentlemen and ladies, that's how you give an injection of testosterone. I hope that was a little helpful for you. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to contact me, and I will see you in 2 weeks for my 2-month on testosterone video. All right.